It's the early 16th century. Whispers are traveling across the newly discovered continent of South America. Tales carried on the wind from tribe to tribe until they reach the ears of the Spanish conquistadors. These are stories of a king so rich that he covers himself in gold dust as a ritual, his body gleaming under the Andean sun before he washes it all away in a sacred lake, along with offerings of golden treasures and precious emeralds. Imagine hearing that. You've just crossed a vast ocean, endured incredible hardship, all for God, glory, and gold. And now you hear of a man, El Dorado, the Gilded One, who literally bathes in it. What will you do? Would the glint of unimaginable wealth blind you to the dangers? Would you risk everything to find him, this living embodiment of riches? These weren't just idle campfire stories. They were the spark that ignited one of history's most enduring and destructive treasure hunts. But was El Dorado a man, a city, an empire paved with gold, or was it something else entirely? A phantom conjured from greed and misunderstanding? And what is the true cost of chasing such dazzling illusions? I'm Danny, and this is Big Topics from English Plus Podcast. Never stop learning. In today's episode, we're going on an expedition of our own. We'll trace the legend of El Dorado from its fascinating indigenous roots with the Muisca people of Colombia to its transformation into a mythical city of unimaginable wealth that obsessed European explorers for centuries. We'll uncover the brutal realities behind the glittering myth, the lives lost, the cultures shattered, and the environmental price paid. Then we'll get practical. We'll explore what El Dorado means to us today. Is it just an old story, or does the pursuit of our own El Dorados still drive us, for better or worse? We'll look at the psychology of treasure hunts and the enduring power of such myths. And of course, because this is English Plus Podcast, we're not just exploring history. We're boosting our English too. In our language-focused section, we'll dive into key vocabulary and phrases from our journey, helping you talk about legends, exploration, and ambition with confidence. We'll have a speaking segment to practice these skills, and then a grammar and writing workshop where we'll tackle a writing challenge inspired by the quest for El Dorado. Finally, we'll open up the floor for discussion, pondering some thought-provoking questions about the legend and its modern echoes. So strap on your boots, fill your canteens, and sharpen your minds. The quest for El Dorado begins now. Let's find out what truly lies at the heart of this captivating legend. All right, let's get into the heart of the El Dorado legend. It's a story that morphs and changes like a river. So to truly understand it, we need to go back to its source. Our story doesn't begin with a city of gold, but with a man and a ritual. We're in the Andean highlands of present-day Colombia, specifically around Lake Guatavita. This was the territory of the Muisca people, a sophisticated civilization with a rich culture, skilled goldsmiths, and a deep connection to their environment. Now, the Muisca had a very special ceremony for appointing a new chief, or zipa. This wasn't your average coronation. The new leader, as part of his initiation, would be covered head to toe in sticky resin. And then fine gold dust would be blown onto him until he was a gleaming golden figure, literally El Dorado, the Gilded Man. Imagine the scene. This radiant, golden leader, accompanied by priests, would be taken on a raft to the center of the sacred Lake Guatavita. As the sun hit his golden form, he would offer precious items, more gold, emeralds, intricate tunjos, which are votive figures, into the lake as offerings to their gods. Then he himself would plunge into the cold, dark waters, washing the gold from his body, a symbolic act of renewal and an offering to the deities believed to reside in the lake. The people on the shores would cheer, play music, and also cast their own offerings into the water. This ritual was a powerful symbol of leadership, wealth, Though for the Muisca, gold was more about spiritual value and status than currency as Europeans understood it, and it was also a symbol of religious devotion. It wasn't about streets paved with gold or golden palaces. It was a sacred periodic rite. So how did this very specific, localized ritual transform into a continent-spanning legend of a lost city of gold? Well, that's where the Europeans come in. And a classic case of things getting lost and wildly exaggerated in translation and transmission. Think about it. You're a Spanish conquistador in the early 1500s. You've heard rumors of gold. You've seen indigenous people wearing golden ornaments. Then someone tells you about a ritual involving a man covered in gold and treasures thrown into a lake. What's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably not a nuanced understanding of Muisca religious practices. More like, where's this golden man? Where's this lake full of treasure? The first accounts of this El Dorado ritual likely reached the Spanish in Quito, modern-day Ecuador, around the 1530s. Sebastian de Belalcazar, one of Pizarro's lieutenants, is often credited with popularizing the term El Dorado after hearing these tales. The news spread like wildfire among the conquistadors, each retelling adding a little more glitter, a little more promise. Now, what about you? Now, you're listening to me. If you were one of those early explorers hearing these fragmented stories, how might your own desires and expectations have colored your interpretation of the El Dorado ritual? Would you have focused on the spiritual significance or the material wealth? Well, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now let's get back to our story. The Muisca, by the way, were eventually conquered by Gonzalo Jimenez de Quesada in the late 1530s. The Spanish did find Lake Guatavita, and yes, they tried to drain it. Several times, over centuries in fact. In 1545, Conquistador Lazaro Fonte and Hernan Perez de Quesada used a bucket chain of laborers for 3 months. They lowered the water level by about 3 meters and found several hundred pieces of gold worth a few thousand pesos. A decent haul, but not the mountains of gold they dreamed of. Later in the 1580s, Antonio de Sepulveda, a Bogota merchant, cut a deep notch into the lake's rim, lowering the water level by about 20 meters before the cut collapsed, killing many workers. He found more gold artifacts, but again, not the legendary mother lode. Even as late as the early 20th century, an English company managed to drain the lake almost completely, only to find the bottom covered in mud that hardened like concrete in the sun, making recovery of any artifacts incredibly difficult. They found a few items, but ultimately the company went bankrupt. The irony is, Lake Guatavita did contain gold, a testament to the Muisca ritual, but the legend had already outgrown the reality of this sacred lake and its Gilded Man. The quest was on for something much, much bigger. So, El Dorado starts as a man, a ritual, but human imagination, especially when fueled by greed, is a powerful thing. The Spanish and later other Europeans weren't content with just a man covered in gold dust. Their minds, already filled with medieval European myths of fantastical lands and immense riches, began to expand the story. If there's a gilded man, they reasoned, surely he must rule over a gilded kingdom. A city, perhaps, where gold is as common as stone, where houses are roofed with it and streets are paved with it. And so, El Dorado, the man, gradually morphed into El Dorado, the place, a mythical city of unparalleled wealth, hidden somewhere in the unexplored vastness of South America. The location of this mythical city was, shall we say, rather flexible. Initially, searches focused around the Colombian Andes, near the Muisca territory. But as expeditions failed to find this golden metropolis, its supposed location kept shifting, eastward into the vast plains of the Llanos, then further south, deep into the impenetrable Amazon rainforest, or into the Guiana highlands. If it wasn't here, it must be over there, just beyond the next range of mountains, just down that unexplored river. This shifting mirage led to countless expeditions, often ill-fated by some of the most famous and infamous names of the age of exploration. Think of Gonzalo Pizarro, half-brother of Francisco Pizarro, the conqueror of the Incas. In 1541, he led a massive expedition from Quito eastward into the Amazon basin in search of El Dorado and a mythical land of cinnamon. It was an unmitigated disaster. They faced starvation, disease, hostile indigenous tribes, and incredible suffering. Pizarro's lieutenant, Francisco de Orellana, got separated with a group of men while searching for food. Orellana and his men ended up making the first known European navigation of the entire length of the Amazon River, an incredible feat of exploration in itself, but they found no El Dorado. Pizarro, meanwhile, staggered back to Quito with a tiny fraction of his original force, a broken man. Then there were the German adventurers. The Westler banking family had received a concession for Klein Venedig, Little Venice in modern Venezuela, from King Charles I of Spain. From 1528 to 1546, they sent explorers like Ambrosius Ehinger, Nikolaus Federmann, and Philip von Hutten on brutal expeditions into the interior, all chasing the El Dorado dream, all ending in failure and often death. And it wasn't just the Spanish and Germans. Sir Walter Raleigh, the English courtier, poet, and explorer, became obsessed with El Dorado. He believed it was located in Guyana, now parts of Venezuela, Guyana, Suriname, and Brazil. In 1595, he led an expedition up the Orinoco River. He captured a Spanish settlement, interrogated the governor Antonio de Berrio, who was also searching for El Dorado, and gathered stories from local tribes about a great golden city called Manoa, supposedly on the shores of a huge inland lake, Lake Perim. Raleigh never found Manoa or Lake Perim, which cartographers dutifully added to maps for centuries, despite it likely being a misinterpretation of flooded savannas. He returned to England with some gold samples, probably traded, not from a golden city, and wrote a wildly popular book, The Discovery of the Large, Rich, and Beautiful Empire of Guyana, with a relation of the great and golden city of Manoa, which the Spaniards call El Dorado. This book, full of tantalizing descriptions, further inflamed the El Dorado fever in Europe and inspired more doomed voyages. Raleigh's second expedition in 1617 was even more disastrous. He was under strict orders from King James I not to antagonize the Spanish, as England and Spain were then at peace. However, his men, led by Lawrence Kemys, attacked a Spanish outpost. Raleigh's son Wat was killed in the fighting. Kemys, finding no gold and facing Raleigh's wrath, committed suicide. Upon his return to England, Raleigh, having disobeyed the king and failed to find El Dorado, was executed in 1618, partly due to Spanish pressure. A rather grim end for one of El Dorado's most famous proponents. Now let's pause and consider this. Hundreds, if not thousands, of European lives were lost in these expeditions, along with thousands of the indigenous people, if not more. They endured unimaginable hardships, disease, starvation, attacks, getting lost in dense jungles. What does this tell us about the power of belief, or perhaps the power of greed? When does ambition become a dangerous obsession? I'd love to hear what you think. Does our modern world have similar El Dorado quests that drive people to extreme lengths? I bet we still have some El Dorados of our own. And now let's continue. The allure of El Dorado was so strong that it even spawned mutinies and incredible tales of cruelty, like the infamous expedition of Pedro de Ursua and Lope de Aguirre in 1560 to 1561. Sent to find El Dorado, Aguirre, a notoriously ruthless conquistador, rebelled, murdered Ursua and many others, declared himself Prince of Peru, Tierra Firme and Chile, and led a reign of terror down the Amazon. He even wrote a defiant letter to King Philip II of Spain. Eventually, he was caught and killed by Spanish forces. But his story is a dark testament to the madness that the El Dorado myth could inspire. So the legend grew, fed by hope, rumor, and the occasional misinterpreted piece of evidence. Each failed expedition didn't necessarily dampen the belief. For some, it just meant El Dorado was even better hidden, even more remote, and therefore even richer. So, my friends, we've seen how El Dorado evolved from a Muisca ritual into a phantom city of gold, leading countless explorers on a wild and often deadly goose chase. But what was the real cost of this centuries-long obsession? And why does the legend still fascinate us today? The most immediate and devastating impact was, of course, on the indigenous populations of South America. The search for El Dorado wasn't a gentle, scholarly inquiry. It was an invasion. Conquistadors and explorers, driven by gold fever, blazed trails of destruction. They enslaved indigenous people to serve as porters, guides, and laborers. They tortured them for information about the mythical city. They brought European diseases like smallpox and measles, which decimated native communities that had no immunity. Villages were looted, cultures were disrupted, and entire populations were wiped out. Think about it from their perspective. Suddenly, these heavily armed, strange-looking men appear in your lands, demanding gold, food, and labor, speaking of a golden city you've never heard of, or perhaps one that is a distorted version of one of your own sacred sites. The search for El Dorado became a justification for horrific brutality and exploitation. The lust for gold overshadowed any respect for human life or established societies. As the historian John Hemming noted, the quest for El Dorado did more to open up the interior of South America than any other single factor. It also did more to destroy its native peoples. It's a sobering thought. The glittering dream of a few came at the nightmarish cost of many. The environment also suffered. Attempts to drain Lake Guatavita, as we mentioned, caused ecological damage. Expedition cut paths through pristine forests, disrupting ecosystems, and the mindset of extraction, taking wealth from the land without regard for consequences, set a pattern that, some might argue, continues in different forms today with the exploitation of natural resources. Just recently, I read an article connecting the historical greed for gold in places like Colombia to the modern-day rush for minerals like lithium and cobalt, often with similar devastating impacts on local environments and communities. Well, history doesn't repeat itself, they say, but it often rhymes. So, did anyone ever find El Dorado? Well, if you mean a literal city with buildings made of gold, then no. It never existed in that form. El Dorado, the city, was a European fantasy, a projection of their own desires onto a vast and mysterious continent. The real El Dorado, the Gilded Man of Lake Guatavita, was found, or rather, his ritual was discovered. But the riches it represented were spiritual and symbolic to the Muisca, not the endless material wealth the Europeans craved. Now, despite the lack of discovery, or perhaps because of it, the legend of El Dorado has endured. It's become more than just a story of a lost city. It's a powerful metaphor. El Dorado can represent any ultimate prize, any seemingly unattainable goal, the pursuit of a dream, the allure of the unknown, or even the dangers of obsession and unattainable desire. You see, El Dorado used to name everything from cars to casinos. Edgar Allan Poe wrote a famous poem called El Dorado about a gallant knight searching for the legendary land, growing old in his quest, only to be told by a pilgrim shadow to ride, boldly ride, if you seek for El Dorado, implying the quest itself, or perhaps the journey to the afterlife, is the true El Dorado. Voltaire satirized the El Dorado myth in his novel Candide, depicting a utopian kingdom in South America where gold and jewels are so common they're treated like pebbles used by children as toys, a commentary on the absurdity of European greed. The idea of a lost city of gold still fires the imagination. Think of movies like Disney's The Road to El Dorado or the Indiana Jones franchise. These stories tap into the ancient desire for adventure and the thrill of discovery, even if the historical reality was much darker. So why does it endure? Perhaps it's because it speaks to something deep in the human psyche, the hope for something more, for a paradise, for a shortcut to happiness or wealth. Or maybe it's the thrill of the unknown, the romance of the quest. So what do you think, my friends? What is the El Dorado of the 21st century? Is it fame? Technological breakthrough? Finding true love? Or is it still, for some, quite literally, hidden treasure? The methods might have changed. We might use satellite imagery instead of hacking through jungles with machetes, but does that fundamental human urge to seek and to find, to chase a dream, still burn as brightly? The legend of El Dorado serves as a fascinating case study in how myths are born, how they evolve, and how they can drive human action, for both good and ill. It's a story of cultural collision, of greed, of incredible endurance, and ultimately, of a dream that was always just over the horizon. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest treasures are not made of gold, but are the stories themselves, and the lessons they hold for us. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of our main exploration of the El Dorado legend. But don't go anywhere, of course, because after this, we'll get a little bit practical. We'll look at what this all means for us today. And then, of course, get ready to boost your language skills with our Focus on Language segment. So you don't want to miss that. Stick around. I'll be right back.
If you're enjoying this episode so far, and you want to listen to the full episode along with all our premium episodes from English Plus Podcast that include our big topics, Plus Bites, courses and series, tales and tunes, and much more, you can do that by subscribing on Apple Podcast or on Patreon. You can find the links in the description of the episode. Take your English and knowledge to the next level and never stop learning with English Plus Podcast.